From the EWTN Radio and Television Studios, this is EWTN Theology Roundtable, a conversation with the experts of EWTN's Department of Theology. Got questions about the liturgy, scripture, or tradition? They have the answers. Now, EWTN Theology Roundtable.
We are delighted that you are joining us for EWTN Theology Roundtable, coming to you live through the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network at this time, and taped for later for EWTN Television. If you're joining us online, we also welcome you to this live webcast of EWTN Theology Roundtable, and we are looking forward to having you on the show here with us. And this is Elena Rodriguez rolling out the red carpet for you. Our experts today from the Theology Roundtable here at EWTN are at your disposal to answer your questions on a very beautiful topic that they have picked for today's show. The gift of a child. God's gift of children to their parents, and parents' responsibility in taking care of the children, in bringing them up in the faith, in educating them. So our panel of experts here with us today is, first of all, Colin Donovan, who is the Vice President of Theology here at EWTN. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you, Elena. Good to be here.
It's great to have you here. And our theology advisors from the EWTN Theology Department, Laura Dittus. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Great to have you back here. And welcome to Robert Klesko as well.
Hey, Elena.
It's great to have you here. We are all children of God, so this show pertains to all of us. And this is certainly one of the shows that instead of asking you to maybe send your little ones, your kids out of the room, we're going to ask you to welcome them into the room. They are part of the show, and they are God's gift to all of us here in society. And Colin, it is very interesting that we are talking about this topic in a moment where we celebrate life as well. We want to also invite our listeners, and I'm going to give you the numbers in just a moment so that you can join in with your question. The number is 1-800-585-9396. Our brave call screener, Matt Kavinsky, also a child of God, is ready to take your questions at 1-800-585-9396. And you can follow us on YouTube. Our very good and nice person, Jeff Burson, is our social media manager, and he's ready to take your questions via the YouTube chat. You can go to youtube.com, search for the EWTN channel, and you'll be able to join in this live webcast on YouTube. And Colin, it is very important that we realize the responsibility that all of us have to bring up children, whether it be spiritually or physically, and bring them up in the faith. Where do you think, but we don't see this happening in society all the time, where do you think that gap comes from? How is it explained?
Well, I think it comes from a lot of conditions in society, most of all the destruction of the family, coming about by many forces in modernity, certainly industrialization over time and so on, and modern society where we move around and all families seem unsettled. Mm-hmm. But I think statistically and sociologically, there's hardly any study that doesn't suggest that the environment of child being born into a family and raised by their own parents is the best environment for children. Mm-hmm. But yet we have many things in our society which militate against that. First of all, there's the attacks on life itself. We just celebrated the March for Life and the month of January dedicated to that and prayer for that. And so attacks begin on life itself, but have continued against the family. There is a materialistic mentality, even an ideology, which would suggest that life is not a gift; it's almost an accident of history and of molecules by which we've come into existence, and it doesn't recognize the sacred character of human life. And certainly, that's a practical atheism, if it is not, in many cases, a theoretical atheism. And we also have today, sadly, a radical selfishness that in many places, in many individuals, makes marriage and family more about the gratification of individuals than it does the responsibility and the love that is owed to children. So there are many forces of history and culture that I think are combining today to make it very difficult. And so I think what we wanted to do today was to emphasize this gift of life, both on the theoretical level and the practical level of the raising and education of children. And I know that it's not like any solution can produce a radical improvement with any quick pace, but we do have to identify what the problem is clearly in order to find out what the antidote is going to be.
Yeah, and I think one thing that our culture it seems to be missing is understanding of gift. We tend to think of that word in purely materialistic terms, where, I receive a gift, we just got done with the Christmas season. If I don't like it, I can return it, I can exchange it, I can even throw it away. And isn't that the same attitude that we've projected onto persons? And the church tells us time and time again that persons are able to give themselves as gift and to receive as gifts. So we're receiving the gift of a child. And we've really lost that appreciation of gift, that persons can be given as gift. And this certainly is a result of original sin. I mean, we had the reading from Mass today for the daily Mass, where it's the original sin. It's driving that wedge between Adam and Eve, and a rejection of the gifts that God had given to them in exchange for this false gift. So it's been a problem from the beginning, and kind of our challenge as Christians now is to try to reclaim that understanding of person as gift. And John Paul II did this tremendously between his theology of the body and his various encyclicals. He talks about, he cites Gaudium et Spes a lot, paragraph 24, that the human being knows him or herself only when they make that complete gift of self. Now, of course, he's talking about within the context of marriage and family life. Now, what does that gift of self look like? Well, I think we can turn to Christ. We can turn to the gospel. How did he give of himself for his family, the church? Certainly through teaching, which is something that we're going to touch on later with the education of children. Certainly through healing, which was the gospel from Mass today, healing the man with the speech impediment. Parents certainly are concerned with the health and well-being of their children. And penultimately, through his sacrifice on the cross, parents have this natural inclination to sacrifice, to give of themselves for their children. And this is something that needs to be, that the church needs to remind the secular culture about again and again, and really make that message clear.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, John Paul, I know I did my licentiate to Sina on this subject. The element of gift, at least in the case of the spouses, obviously he's talking about the act of charity, which we all should be able to, pour ourselves out on behalf of others, on behalf of the needy. That means also taking a certain amount of risk in doing that. But when you're talking about the spouses, there's always this element of mutuality and reciprocity, that I give and then I receive, and together we are bonded more and more closely together. And if you can't understand life as a gift, you can't understand giving yourself as a gift. But I think the other aspect of this, Laura, is in this reciprocity and mutuality, in the giving, comes not only receiving this gift, but also the responsibilities that come with it. And that includes openness to life. This, what Robert was talking about, John Paul's theology, and the fact that in giving there is, he speaks of the fact that masculinity and femininity only really flower in that gift, because how do they flower in fatherhood and motherhood, in bringing the child into the world? But that comes with duty and responsibility.
Right, yeah, so, I mean, to whom much is given, much is expected. But a lot of parents don't realize what a great gift they're given in their children, and the responsibility for them. So one thing that I did in preparing for today was looking at the Catechism, which is really rich on this topic. And so parents are spoken of as primary educators of children, and that doesn't mean like you need to teach them their ABCs only. So it's a much broader topic than that. I think partly in Spanish, the word educación means more than just education, but it's actually the formation of the children and bringing them up. So the Catechism talks about the moral, cultural, and human formation, so growth in the virtues. And then this is a role that begins early, so the early days, you can start praying in the home, and extends later in life. And this includes training in the Christian life, a good example, seeing the parents living charity, and also discipline. And one beautiful quote from the Catechism on this is from Catechism, paragraph 2223. It says, parents have the first responsibility for the education of their children. They bear witness to this responsibility first by creating a home where tenderness, forgiveness, respect, fidelity, and disinterested service are the rule. And the Catechism even goes beyond that, but those are some good starter points for what you might want to inculcate in your family. And then even in religious matters, the parental role is irreplaceable. So the church is kind of there to help with this, but it's not to take the place of the parents. The school isn't to take the place of the parents. So even in the early years, parents are to teach prayer, to help the children see their vocation as children of God. And then Catechism 2226 says, family catechesis precedes, accompanies, and enriches other forms of instruction in the faith. So it's not like you drop your kids off at CCD and you're done. You can't quite delegate someone else to do that for you. They'll help with that, but at the same time, you have your responsibilities too. And then parents have a right to school choice, and that's also in the Catechism. Catechism 2229 talks about a duty as far as possible to choose schools that will best help them in their task as Christian educators. So you can think about this in the early years as well as later on in college, if you're choosing to pay for your child's education. And then the state is to safeguard this right. So those in legal governance are to help allow for this, and the conditions that allow for it. So the Catechism uses the word helping parents in their role of educators. So it's not that the state's going to take over, the church isn't going to take over, you're still an educator. But an educator in the full sense of giving good example of teaching the virtues.
Yeah, and in the Latin root meaning of that word, to draw out of the person.
Yes,
in other words, their full human potential, to draw out of that potential and make them, to sort of actualize it and make them a mature person, be able to enter society humanly, psychologically, morally, religiously, and so on.
And it's very interesting everything that we can do, even if we are spiritual parents to others, but of course those who are physical parents. And when we come back, we're going to be talking also about the inalienable rights of parents and their primary duties as well, here with our EWTN Theology Roundtable expert of panels, Colin Donovan, Laura Dittus, and Robert Klesko are going to be here with you. 1-800-585-9396. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgiani.
I'm a cradle Catholic, went to Catholic school, and I never really wandered from the faith. In fact, after having a taste of working in corporate America, I was literally pulled toward a more meaningful work. I began serving in ministry when I was just 21 years old, and I've never looked back since. I was not fulfilled working in a job where I couldn't talk about Jesus. I am most complete when the topic of conversation is God.
Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, Monday through Saturday, noon Eastern on EWTN Radio.
EWTN Radio Classics is our 24/7 teaching and devotionals channel, straight from the EWTN archives. Go classic with EWTN Radio Classics, online at EWTNradio.net. Now available on the EWTN app.
It's time for Family Man with Dr. Gregory Popchak.
What parent doesn't want their kids to share their faith and values? But how do you do it? How can you get your kids to own their faith? New research published in the book Faith and Family from Oxford University Press observes that while it's important to model the faith by going to church and saying family prayers, it's just as important that the children feel that their faithful family is a warm, loving, supportive, and affectionate place to grow up. researchers found the strength and positivity of the relationships between moms and dads and their kids were among the biggest predictors of whether children would retain their faith as adults. To raise faithful kids, in addition to faithfully going to church and saying family prayers, be affectionate with your kids. Play as a family. Have weekly family days. Create a true community of love. Your children's faith depends on it. I'm Dr. Greg Popchak, but you can call me Family Man.
To discover more ways faith can enrich your life, visit CatholicCounselors.com.
Hey, this is Doug Keck, EWTN President and Chief Operating Officer.
This is Anna Mitchell, host of the Sunrise Morning Show.
This is Raymond Arroyo, host of The World Over. Thanks for listening to EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to EWTN Theology Roundtable on EWTN Radio and Television. Join our conversation with your question or comment. Call us toll-free, 1-800-585-9396. Outside the United States and Canada, call 1-205-271-2985 or send us an email, etr@ewtn.com.
You're listening and watching EWTN Theology Roundtable here on the EWTN network with our expert of panelists, Colin Donovan, Laura Dittus, and Robert Klesko, joining us here to talk about the topic, the gift of a child, God's gift of children to parents, and also parents' responsibilities in bringing up and educating these children. And we have a number of lines here open for you to participate. The number to call is 1-800-585-9396. That number again is 1-800-585-9396. Perhaps at your school you feel that your inalienable rights to educate your children are being set aside, or somebody's trying to educate your child for you. Give us a question, give us a call and ask your questions. We have our experts here, and they are talking about the moral and theological obligations of parents in bringing up their children. Colin Donovan, Laura Dittus, and Robert Klesko. It is an inalienable right of a parent to educate their children in all aspects, not just academics.
That's right, yeah. A lot of distinctions could be made here. The first is that the gift of the child is given to the parents and not to the state. Mm-hmm. The family is prior to states, societies, any institution, especially institutions that are historically rather new, such as large, educational systems and so on. It's very easy for things when they get rolling along to assume that, well, now the authority to decide about children is theirs and not the parents. We've seen egregious examples of this in the last 30 or 40 years with schools substituting their judgment for that of the parents, not just on curriculum, which you would expect a parent would defer on physics, on math, on many subjects, unless there's clearly ideological orientations in the textbooks or something like that. But on the moral issues, on the issue of values and so on, we find more and more that secular values are being imposed almost as a religion. And when those cases are encountered, where minors, without the consent of their parents, are being given contraceptives or taken to abortion providers or being, taught sex education, even though the parents have said, I don't want my child to receive that from you, from your school or whatever. In all of these things, we find in particular places, obviously, schools or school districts saying you have no right to exempt your children. The old rule was always that the school, the parent, teachers acted in loco parentis, not substitution for the parents, but in that context, in place of the parents, because the parents could not accomplish that particular task. Now we find it almost as if the parents are acting as instruments of the state in providing the care of the children. And as we go farther along, and this would have been the case, I think, if the election had turned out differently, we would have found where massive increases of daycare, even obligations to daycare, for not just pre-kindergarten, but as young as 3, the things that were being discussed in that regard. Basically efforts to inculcate a certain secular virtue, in quotes, into children. This is a massive violation of the God-given rights of children.
Yeah, and of parents, too.
And of the parents. The children lose their rights because the parents lose their rights.
And it's almost reached a ridiculous status. And I wonder if it's just that the societal breakdown has caused the schools to step in more and more, that now they're taking more and more rights away from parents. I recall a story not too long ago about a mother who got in trouble, who sent her child to daycare with a very balanced lunch, a sandwich, carrot sticks, and some cookies. The cookies were the issue, and the child had to be sent home. And it's you look at these stories and you think, oh, this can't be the way that our society is going. But certainly this is something where something that I've experienced in homeschooling our children, being connected to others who have a really great Christian mindset in terms of education. And you see that in homeschool communities. You also see that in wonderful Catholic schools, which we just had Catholic Schools Week, where you create these communities of support where parents can lean on one another and then start to have an influence on the wider spheres of influence, where you know the mom who sends their children to public school and maybe they're having an issue. Well, you've got that community. So it goes back to what Laura was talking about earlier, where the church, the wider community, is the support for the parents. And certainly we need more and more of that as our society seems to do crazier and crazier things.
Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of it is imposed from above, and teachers they're going through their teacher formation. Certain obligations are put on them. They love children. They want to help children, but there's all this baggage too that comes along, I think, often with the job. But I think we have a caller. Is that correct, Elena?
We do. We have Jerra in Peoria, Illinois, listening to EWTN Radio. Jerra, what is your question for Colin Donovan? No, for Laura Dittus and Robert Klesko. Go right ahead.
First off, I want to say bless you guys for doing what you do. I try to catch your show as many times as I can.
Thank you.
A little background. I'm a transgender parent. I've grown up in the faith. From Peoria, attended Creighton University in Nebraska, in Omaha, studied communications, and I continue on in the faith. I kind of want to fill a little bit of a gap and maybe open a dialogue between transgender community and those that are raising children, now that this has been embraced, between the church, the Pope, and the medical community. A few parents have contacted me as I'm raising my children with my ex-wife, and she is a Lutheran. I'm a Catholic, and we have, in concert, raised 3 beautiful young men, very successful, all very well educated, and very well balanced. These parents come to me and say, how do I stay connected to the faith? My child's been diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and, this child's going to transition along with, this doctor's diagnosis, and we support this. This is our child. We're not going to deny our child this because we believe this. We've prayed about it. We've seen this. However they've come to that conclusion, they are behind their child 100%, which is commendable. It begs the question, and there's a million roads we can go down with this. I kind of want to stay as close to the vast position as we can. How do we, as transgender parents, approach the church and say, this is a medical diagnosis. We want to raise our children in the faith. God loves everyone. He's not going to cast anyone aside.
Jerra, stay tuned, please. We're about to take a break. On the other side of that break, we'll be very happy to answer your question. I want to ask you to stay on the line here with Colin Donovan, Laura Dittus and Robert Klesko. And you can call in with your question as Jerra did. The number is 1-800-585-9396. That number again is 1-800-585-9396. Stay tuned to more of EWTN Theology Roundtable. We'll be back in just a moment.
Colleen Kelly Mast.
I cannot even count the number of times that God has clearly shown me His power and love when I continue to say yes to Him. He provides for our needs. Even standing at the funeral home during the wake of my late son, the Holy Spirit kept singing in my head, "The joy of the Lord is my strength." I didn't feel very strong at the time, but I knew that God was holding me close.
Mast Appeal with Colleen Kelly Mast. Saturday, 9 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Podcasting is an easy way to automatically receive your favorite EWTN programs on your mobile device. And it's all at your fingertips. Visit EWTN.com/podcast and enjoy your favorite EWTN shows on your mobile phone right now.
And welcome to EWTN's Bookmark Brief. I'm Doug Keck. I just finished interviewing Dr. Ray Guarendi about his book, Back to the Family. Give us a synopsis of this book.
We asked National State Teachers of the Year, all 50 states, who are the best families you've ever seen? We went around the country. We interviewed them. We asked them about their discipline, their communication, their religion. We wanted the nitty-gritty of what made these families raise these kind of admirable, high-quality children.
This book originally came out in 1990, still in print. Is it still relevant today?
At that time, you could see the culture starting to flow against traditional morals. And it's even more so now, Doug.
It's a tsunami, as you might say. Very good. Thank you so much, Dr. Ray. And the book is Back to the Family. And this has been an EWTN Bookmark Brief. Don't forget, the book is available at EWTNRC.com. Thank you for joining us.
This is Bishop Paul Bradley of the Diocese of Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Hi, this is Tim Staples from Catholic Answers Live.
This is Father John Ricardo. Thanks for listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Welcome back to EWTN Theology Roundtable on EWTN Radio and Television. Join our conversation with your question or comment. Call us toll-free, 1-800-585-9396. Outside the United States and Canada, call 1-205-271-2985 or send us an email, etr@ewtn.com.
You're tuning into EWTN Theology Roundtable. Elena Rodriguez welcoming you back. If you're just joining us, join the conversation. We are here with our experts, Colin Donovan, Laura Dittus, and Robert Klesko, talking about the topic of the gift of a child, God's gift of children to parents, and parents' responsibility in bringing up their children. And just before we went to that break, Colin, Laura, and Robert, we were talking to our caller, Jerra, who is asking the question, how do you bring up transgender children, and how do you raise them up to be good children?
Yeah, well, this is problematic at many levels. First of all, the church would be disposed to receive any child or any parents as where they're at in their journey of life. It doesn't constitute an affirmation of a life choice or decision, as the Pope, I think, has made clear with Amoris Laetitia and people in irregular marriages. You know, the duty of the church is to accompany them, not necessarily approving of that which the church disagrees with morally, as being something that God would not will or desire, but rather to come get somebody to accept the truth and then embrace that in, as appropriately required in their life to be living the gospel in accordance with the truth. So that would be a general statement as how the church, the parish, the diocese, whoever should, receive individuals and treat with them. I would disagree, Jerra, with one of your assertions that the Pope and the church has accepted transgenderism. The Pope and the Church have not accepted transgenderism. The Church's moral teaching does not accept transgenderism. So that complicates, obviously, receptivity of people who have had transgender or considering becoming transgender. And it's important to make a distinction here. There is a category which in the past has received multiple kinds of names: hermaphrodite, pseudo-hermaphrodite, intersex, disorders of sexual development, where there are structural, morphological, or phenotypical, in other words, you might describe the appearances of sexual organs, along with physiological problems related to the functioning of metabolism, accompanied often by genetic issues that driving the metabolic and the misdevelopment of the sexual organs and so on. And there the Church does have a decided view, and that is that if there is a leaning in favor of one sex, because you can certainly get a person who is intersex at one or other end of the spectrum, then it is legitimate to help them to develop, in a way that doesn't represent, sort of driving them arbitrarily in the other direction. That is assisting them in achieving their natural sexuality as it is, and not with sort of contradicting it and going against it. So that condition of intersex, and I think in some cases, certainly in the press, the expression transgender I see is used of individuals in that conditions who've had surgeries to assist them or receive drugs to assist them, only to achieve what seems to be the best direction of missed sexual development, morphologically and endocrinology, in terms of hormonally and so on. There is the other category, Jerra, which you mentioned specifically, and that is gender dysphoria. The Church is adamantly opposed to the idea that a psychological disposition of any kind, consider a male who's, I'm psychologically, I just got so much sex drive, I need woman after woman after woman. The Church wouldn't say, that's your natural disposition and your orientation, go for it, because that's you following, how you're made. The Church wouldn't say that. And so the Church cannot say to the person who has gender dysphoria, the solution to this is to have surgeries and receive chemicals for the rest of your life to force your body to act against its normal genetic and other disposition. The mind is more malleable than the body. The body and the genetics at least give us what God gives, masculinity and sexuality that has to be developed. So, yes, the Church will meet transgender parents and transgender children where they're at and accompany them and help them to their own personal, spiritual, and human fulfillment, but in ways that are in accord with the gospel, and that's the way it should be done. So for any parent who is thinking of transitioning a child, first of all, I don't think a decision like that can be made. This is a complete decision. We wouldn't let our children choose what food to have at 7, 8, 9, 10. Why would we let them choose what sex they want to be, unless there's some, as I said, underlying medical thing. So this is not a settled issue in the medical community. It's a settled issue in those societies that have adopted the idea that psychological difficulties are only a problem if the person is bothered by them, and the way to get rid of the bother is to make the world around conform to you, and to physically conform your own nature to that. Then all troubles are supposed to disappear. That's simply not going to happen. So hopefully no Catholic priest will be fostering the idea that the church is okay with transgenderism. I don't know about the other Christian denominations. I assume that for many of them this is not a problem. So I think the way to help any child, male, female, or those that have had this kind of mutilating surgery, is to help them grow morally and spiritually. And if that means for them trying to change that down the road somewhere to recover the nature that God gave them, then that might be where it is. We have a law and a culture that are going the other way, so this may be a forbidden postulate in 10 or 15 years, the way things are going. So you may not find that to be terribly welcoming, Jerra, but I don't know if you are Catholic or not. You mentioned the Pope, but that's the church's take on it. That's the morality of the church, and anyone who would make you believe that is not the position of the church doesn't know what the position of the church is.
We want to thank Jerra for the phone call, and you can call into 1-800-585-9396. That number again to be on the show here with us is 1-800-585-9396. EWTN Theology Roundtable with Colin Donovan, Laura Dittus, and Robert Klesko, talking about the gift of a child, God's gift of children to parents, and parents' right and responsibility to educate them in the faith. We have Leo calling in, and he is in Michigan listening to EWTN through the EWTN app. Leo, what is your question? Go right ahead.
Yes, my question, I have a 5-month-old, and how do you say he decides to do something that's not morally in line with the church? I know you guys were just talking about raising transgender children. How do you approach a child and correct that person, or whether he's a child or a teenager? How do you correct that behavior and make it more morally in line with the church teaching?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a good question. Certainly for young children, the church understands that a young child doesn't have the full faculty of the reason yet, and so what they do, when my 2-year-old ruined something of mine, and I get upset, I say, no, that wasn't right, that was mine, that was it's something I was working on, or they're not morally culpable because he doesn't know any better at his age. So certainly those types of things, that's where God gives parents the grace of being patient and having that charity, and certainly we need that as parents.
The sacramental virtue.
Exactly, the grace coming through marriage and family life. I think certainly as children grow older, and the church in her wisdom has set the age of reason to be about age 7, but that's, certainly there can be more mature children, or that maturity can be delayed. But around the time that they're making their first confession, which is about age 7, that's where moral culpability comes in. So if your 7, 8, or 13-year-old is stealing or uses foul language, or whatever the issue happens to be, gentle correction, calling them back to, hey, that's not the right way to behave. You need to correct. You need to stop that. Certainly discipline is something that each parent has a different approach towards. But certainly it's essentially important to the home environment, and it's one of those unalienable rights of the family unit of parents to come up with a system of discipline for their children to correct those behaviors. And the idea of that correction is training in virtue. That you're not just correcting it and then leaving it. You're correcting it and then also teaching your child about the appropriate virtue to correct the behavior, to get them beyond the sin, and to help them grow in their relationship with God by the exercise of that virtue. And I think explaining to them that just like, when you're working out the body, when you're going for jogs or doing weight training, it takes muscle memory. Well, our moral life is very much the same way. It takes moral memory, that you have to repeat those virtuous acts in order to overcome maybe sinful behaviors.
Yeah. Now, you have more kids than I do. You have 4, right? Mm-hmm. And I have 2. But the problem is the same. If you vary the bedtime or the practices of going to bed, great upset.
Yes.
You have to have consistency.
Consistency.
And, it's the hobgoblin of small minds, but you have to be consistent with children. I'm accused of talking them to death. Well, they don't really understand. Well, maybe eventually they'll keep hearing it and then they'll learn. But, sometimes maybe we forget that the parent's example is,
Sure. Kids learn a lot by what's not said, too.
Exactly.
I like this quote from Blessed Paul VI. He says, "Modern man listens more willingly to witnesses than teachers. If he does listen to teachers, it is because they are witnesses." And that comes from Evangelium Nunciandi. And I think that so much in the home, too, if children model the love between their parents. I know a mother who told me one time that she and her husband go on vacation together. They have like 9 children or perhaps more. But that's their gift to their children is trying to strengthen their relationship, because the relationship between the parents is very important. And then even the older children help teach the younger children. I know in my own family, I'm one of 6 children. I'm the oldest of 6 children, but I'm sometimes blown away by the virtues of my younger siblings. Just seeing my brother get up early to make lunch for my dad, or things like that, where it's like, he didn't have to do that. I mean, that was totally a sacrifice on his part to show that he cared for my dad. And so virtues are sometimes more easily seen and learned through practice than even by teaching.
I like the idea of the older siblings because that shows they've picked it up from the parents. That's a powerful message. Yeah. This is just not the grown-ups who are telling me about the example of my older brothers and sisters.
And that's the blessing of a large family. Certainly Scripture talks about, children are a gift from the Lord, and large families are looked on scripturally as being a tremendous sign of God's blessing, and the Catechism cites that as well. And I think you have that when you see the interaction of the children, the older ones growing and maturing and taking care of the younger ones, and that mutual exchange. And I go back to my point about the gift of self, that happens even between the kids, even between the young kids, that they're learning how to sacrifice of themselves to care for someone else. And that's an example, certainly a Christ-like example, that can only come from that kind of exchange, that kind of interaction, that kind of, it's perfectly fit within the situation of the family.
And you see that in children, even though we all have an essentially selfish nature through fallen, we're talking about original sin and fallen nature, but then you see these startling little examples of kindness to the other children, other kids in the family. It's very gratifying also for the parents.
Yeah, the children teach the parents as well.
Yep, that's right.
We have Michael following on YouTube, and he is hiding a post that says, "You become a parent when you have 1 child." Fair enough. And then he says, then you have two children, you become a referee.
but there's still 2 on 2 then.
It's
that's
even
true.
out. It is.
That's true.
There's also the notion of becoming a spiritual parent when you don't have children, but the Lord puts some younger person in your life, and you have the responsibility of providing a good, solid example and good, solid advice to this younger person.
Parenting is part of human growth, and some will be parents in the natural order, and some will be parents in the spiritual order. It's no coincidence that in the church we have spiritual fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters, because of that idea that we all are, we are either the cause, for instance, in the case of the priest or deacon who helps with baptisms or marriage, the cause of spiritual growth, the agent of it, as the parents are the agents of passing on natural life. And so everybody is called to fertility, as it were, natural fertility or spiritual fertility. And I think the big hardship, maybe we could talk about this a little bit, with infertile couples. They want to go sometimes, they want a child so much to go to the extreme of using immoral means like in vitro fertilization or artificial insemination. These kinds of processes which are gravely evil in Catholic teaching and in the natural law as well. But they can, if they can't be naturally fruitful, they can always be spiritually fruitful. They can even be naturally fruitful in a sense through adoption or fostering or other ways. I mean, this is a big problem because I don't know what the numbers are. 1 in 7 or 1 in 5 couples are infertile, something like that.
So some of the best people that I know, they're unable to have children of their own, but man, do they love their nieces and nephews, and they're actively involved in their lives and in taking care of them, in teaching them in the faith and teaching them in virtue. So you don't have to be a physical father or mother to have love and make that gift of self. And of course, it's within the framework of the family. And then, you talk about spiritual fatherhood and motherhood. Man, how we benefit from the ministry of the friars here as spiritual fathers and the sisters up in Hansville. And it's a real fruitful spiritual fatherhood and motherhood that they have that we've all benefited from.
Yeah, it's a parallel to, in the Old Covenant, there was a blood relationship by which people were brothers and sisters of the same family and tribe and nation. In the church, there is a spiritual relationship through baptism by which we are all brothers and sisters in Christ and fathers and mothers as well. And I think that parallelism is natural because this is what the human being needs to really reach their full potential.
And just on the topic of childless couples, there actually is a catechism paragraph that speaks of that too. It's Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1654. But it says, spouses to whom God has not granted children can nevertheless have a conjugal life full of meaning. In both human and Christian terms, their marriage can radiate a fruitfulness of charity, of hospitality, and of sacrifice. And I know personally couples who've either had children later in life, so they might have a smaller family than they would have wanted to, or don't have children, but at the same time their hearts are open, and their hearts are open to the local community. And also for those who may have experienced miscarriage, the church actually has a blessing for those who have had miscarriages too, and that's. You can ask your parish priest for that blessing, and that's on the USCCB website. There's a link to a blessing after a miscarriage. So.
That would be usccb.org, I believe. And that's usccb.org. You can call in the show, EWTN Theology Roundtable, with Colin Donovan, Laura Dittus, and Robert Klesko, talking about the gift of a child, God's gift to parents, their children as their gifts, and also parents' responsibility in bringing them up. We go to Theresa. Theresa is in Avon Lake, Ohio, listening to us through The Rock. Go ahead, Theresa, with your question, please.
Hi, yes, thank you. It's a kind of a question statement. I was just listening to what you had spoken earlier about transgender and the church's faith and position on it. And my husband and I are devout Catholics, and we are in line with that. However, we have one of our children who is struggling with it for a couple of years now, and it's really kind of put a big tear in our family. And the difficulty that arises is that we are coming from a position of love and, loving our child, but yet not condoning the choice that the path that he's going down. And I think the difficulty that we have is, although the Catholic Church is saying this is not something we support, my husband and I are having difficulty finding resources to help support us to get the right help for my son. I think at this point he doesn't want to pursue speaking to any priest or things like that. But to get the ammunition or the information to try to convey to our son to understand that God created him as a male and to learn about that and embrace that, and not understanding how we can get him. I mean, I think it's going to be a lifelong struggle, but I think that's the difficulty because he is surrounding himself with people who find that there's nothing wrong with it and actually encouraging it, which is very disturbing and challenging.
Well, part of it is a factual thing. There's a lot of propaganda in favor of this. There's no real evidence that it brings peace, and it's offered as a way of achieving peace with the dysphoria. at best, the evidence is mixed. I read something recently which affirmed a conclusion made at Johns Hopkins in the 80s that the mental health of individuals after transgender surgery did not improve. If anything, it worsened, as a result of which Johns Hopkins stopped doing transgender surgeries. They were transsexual surgeries. They were the first to do them in the country, and then they also stopped. So I think part of it is getting a mixed message. You are absolutely right. The resources out there. I bet if you went to your typical Catholic charities and said, "Can you direct me to a Catholic or at least a Christian psychologist or psychiatrist," would they know which ones would adopt the field's standard, which is, change the body, give the lifelong drugs to coerce the cells to agree with the body changes you've made? Or could you find a Christian one? That would be a route to go. I don't know if any of the Christian psychologists who appear on EWTN, like Dr. Ray or Dr. Popchak, whether they might be contacts that you could to see if they have resources to direct you to for that.
Or Courage.
Or Courage also, although we think of them mostly as dealing with homosexual, same-sex attraction. They also maybe in this environment of gender ideology and gender theory and all of that, they may be adapting to that. I think that might be a So I would recommend those three: Dr. Ray, Dr. Greg Popchak, who's also on EWTN, or to Courage, to see if they have resources that would be in that local area or aware of them, or can direct you to somebody who would. It's a problem. I'm pretty sure it would be, and that most dioceses would not be prepared to help you. The other one would be the National Catholic Bioethics Center. They might also have a direction for you. They're in Philadelphia there. So I don't know if that will help, but hopefully somewhere in there you can find some resources.
And these are great resources for those of you who might be listening and can't take down notes right now. This show is being posted on EWTN's YouTube channel. So you can go to YouTube and youtube.com and search for the EWTN channel and this show, Theology Roundtable, with Colin Donovan, Laura Dittus, and Robert Klesko. This brings us to the end of our show. It's gone by so quickly. Thank you very much for your time and expertise.
Thank you, Elena.
Thank you.
And it is such an important opportunity to bring to mind how our role is so important that we need to ask God's gift of the light of the Holy Spirit to be good physical or spiritual parents. We ask this as a prayer for you and your family. We ask you to keep tuning in to EWTN for some good, solid Catholic programming. EWTN Theology Roundtable will be on next month with a new topic. Re-air of this show on television will be February 19th. That's a Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Also on Saturday, February 25th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So you can join in. And we ask the Lord's protection for you and the light of the Holy Spirit in being a good example.